I was just recently asked to make a video telling my steps of how I went from part-time seller to a full-time eBay seller who now has to lease a building to run their eBay business out of. I like to tell people I started selling during the spring of 1987. My grandparents had this full-size bus that they took all the seats out except like the first couple rows so they could fill it full of junk, and they would take it to a local flea market. They used to take bungee straps because buses didn't have seat belts and bungee strap my baby seat to the bus seats to take me to the flea market. So I think that's where I kind of started. But then after that, I grew up really poor, so we went yard selling every weekend. A lot of our clothes and stuff like that came from yard sales. So it was always evident that you can buy cheap stuff at yard sales, and a lot of times below what it was worth. I started off with just a booth. I wasn't selling online. So I would pick up stuff at yard sales and put them in my flea market booth, and I was doing pretty good. And then I started putting the occasional higher dollar item on eBay, and that's how I got started. I started off with just a spare room in my house, and I had a couple of those like big Lowe's moving boxes that I had box 1, box 2, box 3 written on. And I would have like 40, 50 listings at a time. And then I went through a breakup and I had to sell that house. And in between selling that house and getting an apartment on my own, I stayed at a buddy's house. So I literally had like one of these plastic shelves like this one right here with a laser printer on it and a few boxes on it at the foot of my air mattress while I crashed on my buddy's floor, just selling the occasional item here and there while I worked a full-time job at a fiberglass insulation factory. I then found the apartment that I've been looking for, and eventually I filled the spare room of that apartment up. And I was doing about $1,000 a month on eBay roughly at the time. If I recall, I think I was roughly, because at that time I had a full-time job and I was saving every penny I made on eBay for the down payment for another house because I just went through a breakup and sold my house. So at the time I didn't own a house. I was just staying in the apartment. So I remember I was saving about $1,000 a month. So time I got out of that lease, I think I had about $12,000 saved up in my eBay account. And in the meantime, I'd started dating a girl, and then she moved into the apartment. We weren't married yet, but it worked out. So I'm not going to say against my better judgment. I don't recommend people buying houses with people they're not married with. But in this case, it worked. So then we bought where I live now, and it had a full-size garage and a basement. I filled up the entire garage. I was still working my full-time job. And then I filled up the entire basement. I was still working my full-time job. I worked 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. at that factory. So I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'd do my shipping because the postal service was closed while I was at work. And it was 12-hour shifts, so I had 3 or 4 days off every week, and then that's when I would source and really catch up. And it finally started happening. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel because I hated the job that I currently had. Like I said, we made fiberglass insulation, so we used these 2,000 degree ovens to melt glass into a liquid form, and then they would spin it into like the bat insulation you see in the walls. I worked there for 11 years. 2 years before I quit, I made the same on eBay as I did at that job. And it was as much as I hated the job, it was a good union factory job, so I was doing all right. And then I sat down and talked to my wife, and she agreed if I could maintain that through another year there to make sure it wasn't a fluke, that I would have her blessing to quit my job and attempt this full time. So in that last year, I saved because I wanted my game plan to be, because through this is COVID's going on. I'm like, what if COVID comes back? What if I get sick? So I pretty much had enough in the business banking account to if I didn't sell anything for 6 months, I could pay my salary for 6 months because I pay myself a weekly salary. I don't just live on the business bank account, but it pays a salary to me and the rest stays in there for inventory and other business expenses. So at that time, I'm busting at the gills of my garage and basement. I at the point where I can't grow anymore. So then I lease the building that I'm in now. I've been in this building for 3 years, and anybody that follows me, I share my numbers every Thursday in the morning. So that's kind of my steps how I went from nothing to going full time on eBay. And thanks for watching, guys.